Hello and welcome to Lansing Pulse. I'm Ken Miller, joined as always by City Administrator Tim Vandall. Tim, the biggest issue in Lansing over the next few months, I don't think there's really any argument here. It's going to be that public vote in November about whether to raise the sales tax rate to pay for a city pool. I guess just provide some of the details, and we're going to be doing a lot of educational information sharing over the next couple of months, but maybe a primer just to start us out.
Yeah. Well, it's no secret, staff and the council, for years we've been getting comments from citizens about the desire for a municipal aquatic facility. And, one of our responses was always, these things are multi-millions of dollars. How do we pay for this? What do we want? Where is it going to be? All of these things. So for the last year or so, we've been studying this topic. The council, myself, our staff, we've been studying this topic. We've talked about it at a couple of different work sessions. So now we're at the point where, we're able to put it on the ballot to our citizens and say, hey, if you're okay with your sales tax rate going up 0.45%, we can fund an $8 or $9 million municipal aquatic facility. We're going to have an article about it in the Lansing Connection coming up. Like you had mentioned, I think we're going to be sending out mailers when it gets closer. We're going to be talking about it at the next Coffee with the City Administrator. We'll be talking about it at future council meetings. So we're really going to be trying to get the word out to citizens over the next few months. It's important to note, the city cannot advocate for anything like this. So right now, all we're doing is trying to educate people. And quite frankly, I've heard about this from people on both sides of the aisle. I've heard from people who think this is a great idea and they're passionate supporters of an aquatic facility. And recently, somebody who is retired and doesn't have children at home reached out to me and said they thought this was a bad idea. But that's the whole point of putting it on the ballot and letting the citizens decide. Now, a couple of things that's also worth noting. Right now, we've only done conceptual design. So engineering and design on something like this would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we want to wait until November 8th, until that vote is complete, before we do more formal design. So we don't have an exact price, we don't have an exact detail on the features, but in general, we can say we're shooting to have at least a couple of water slides, maybe a small lazy river, some laps, so perhaps we could do some small swimming tournaments in the summer.
Well, and the conceptual, and we've got a diagram of it graphically in the connection coming up, but I think city staff and the city council, you had to show something to educate people, and you had to spend some money to do it. But like you're saying, we're not going to go full tilt and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a design on something that may not pass.
Exactly, and that was the challenge there. Now, regarding the costs of it, so sales tax, if approved, would go up 0.45%. So that would put Lansing's sales tax rate at 9.4% throughout the entire city. For comparison, that would put us a little bit higher than Tonganoxie, a little bit higher than Basser, but we would be 0.1% less than Leavenworth. So we'd kind of be still in that range where it's pretty common. And especially too, when you look at Wyandotte counties or Johnson counties, some of their sales tax rates, and especially some of those sales tax districts, exceed 10%. So a 9.4% sales tax rate, while high, wouldn't be beyond the ballpark, I guess, for comparison. But again, so right now we're just trying to educate people, let them know the pros and the cons, because again, this is a challenging time to be asking for an increase in sales tax with inflation. But this was something that I think a lot of our citizens were passionate about and reached out to our council about. And to our council's credit, we're putting this on the ballot and we're letting our residents decide whether or not to move forward with this.
Okay, on the development front, there is significant work being done. And I guess not only on the southeast corner of Main Street and Eisenhower Road, because the intersection is being totally redone, but from a development perspective, that southeast corner of Main Street, this is where the old shoebox is and about to be was. What can you tell us about that? I know that's kind of in the planning process right now. What's the latest there?
Yeah, well, so for a couple things. First off, the contractor for that intersection just put up those light poles,
Right,
so that's
right.
been really exciting to see, and
Right.
you're seeing them work on that box culvert on Eisenhower. So it's been fun to see that progress on that project. But even beyond that, like you had mentioned, the southeast corner of that property where the shoebox was. That's under contract with a company called Take 5 Oil. So that's public. They've been at the planning commission meeting
Right.
and everything, so it's public. Right now, it's in the planning process, and there seems to be a little bit of discussion about the alley behind where this oil change place would be, and who's responsible for improvements to the alley and how far those improvements have to go. So those are the discussions that are happening right now. So it's not, nothing's really a done deal yet, but those are the discussions that are happening. It's interesting too, when these people reached out to us, I had never heard of Take 5 Oil before, and when you Google their company and see they've got a few other locations in the metro, it's kind of an interesting concept. It's, you go through, you get your oil change done in 5 minutes, and you never have to leave
Right,
your car. So that's why they're able to get something like this in such a small lot. So they really don't need that much parking because you stay in your car the whole time the oil change is going on. So it's a pretty small building, but I think most of their buildings, they're pretty sharp looking, and it's something that could be a positive for Lansing. But like I said, right now, just went through the planning commission, and I think it might be going toward the city council at some point. But the discussion right now is revolving around what will happen with that alley. Will Take 5 Oil be responsible for improving the entire alley or just a portion of the alley? And then if it's only a portion, who pays for the rest? So those are the discussions that are happening right now.
Okay, we are recording this at the end of July, and of course, your finance department and yourself, and the city council for that matter, has been working on the 2023 city budget. It's just about in the books. Talk about some of the highlights there, and also the fact that I think the council will be asked to approve it a little bit later this year. It'll be in September. Usually we're doing this in August. But be that as it may, talk a little bit about some of the highlights of the pending budget.
I feel like the budget that the council went over at our work session recently, it reflects a commitment to progress, but also a bit of frugality on our council's part. One of the big projects that I'm really excited about that we included in the budget, so the decorative lighting on Center Drive, in really rough shape. We've been aware of that for a while, but I want to say the company that originally installed those 20 years ago, I think it went belly up, so we've had challenges replacing parts on those light poles. So that's a project that's going to be slated for 2023. But also we're going to be talking about what to do with those islands on Center Drive, because I know we want to be sure that any prospect who looks at purchasing property on Center Drive can have full access for those turning movements, and some of those islands restrict turning movements a little bit for semis. So that's something that is slated for the 2023 budget. I want to say that'll be around $700,000, but that's a project I'm excited about. Like always, our capital improvement plan and paying for repaving roads, redoing curbs, redoing sidewalks. That's always a big ticket item in our budget, and I want to say we're allocating $940,000 for that in 2023. So that'll be a big thing. I'd mentioned earlier a little bit of frugality on our part. Our city council and Mayor McNeil, they're very passionate about fiscal responsibility. And I know they'd heard from a lot of citizens about valuation increases and how challenging it is dealing with that. And, even when entities keep their mill rate flat, if valuations go up significantly, that resident's paying more in property taxes. So it was important to our city council to try to lower our tax rate pretty notably this year, and so as of right now, it's looking like it would be a 4.6 mil decrease for our residents, which is, I think that's the largest property tax decrease in the history of Lansing. It's going to be very significant.
Right.
The thing that's a little bit of a challenge in communicating that to residents right now, that 4.6 mil decrease, it affects different properties differently. Mm-hmm. If your valuation went up 8%, it would affect you this much.
Right.
If your valuation went up 20%, it might impact you this much.
Yeah.
So it's challenging to say to residents, hey, we're decreasing 4.6 mils and it'll save you X dollars, because it impacts every resident differently. But when you get that letter from the county, I would encourage folks to look at that, because the city rate is going down pretty substantially. And I know our council and Mayor McNeil are excited about that. And like I said, I know our governing body is passionate about fiscal responsibility. So yeah, the budget is 99% in the books. It will be voted on September 1st. Mm-hmm. So a little bit later than normal. So I guess, I suppose if there was some type of natural disaster in the next month or so, something could change. But as of right now, looking like it'll be a 4.6 mil decrease voted on September 1st. And like I said, we're excited about it. We've got a lot of projects that we're going to tackle next year, but it also reflects a little bit of fiscal restraint.
Right. You've brought this up a couple of times, and I know any of us that go to the grocery store or buy a gallon of gas here and there, we're very aware of high inflation right now. So as you're crafting this budget, how do you try to plan for that? And I know we've talked about in the past, it's very challenging when you think about or talk about things like gas consumption, whether that's the police department, whether that's public works. How do you try to guess and build into your future budgets, knowing that there's a good chance gas could go up, could go down, but more likely up? And what's the contingency?
When we're crafting the budget, our finance director, Beth Sanford, a lot of times she will look at trends from previous years for departments, and if we spent X number of dollars and we had 8 vehicles and we're buying 2 more vehicles or whatever, we'll look at that for trends. So one example that I'll give you though, so last year we budgeted $35,000 for gasoline for the police department. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, we probably blew through that in April.
Right.
But that's the reason why you have reserves, just so we can offset some of those increases. And it's not sexy, and a lot of times residents might not see that. But again, that's why you have reserves. So we can continue to put fuel in our squad cars,
and patrol,
and patrol, and put fuel in public works vehicles and things like that. So. You try to budget for those contingencies. You try to foresee, the worst case scenario of what could happen, and you plan for that with your reserves. The flip side that I will tell you, though, a lot of times in past years when we would have reserves or we would budget that cushion into our budget, there's times when people would say, "Oh, you don't need that much," or whatever. And this is the kind of year where it's like, well. Yeah, you do need it. And it's challenging too, even beyond that fuel example, which is so easy for us to see.
Right.
There are dozens of other examples through the city right now that we're hearing about. Our IT contractor is asking for more money because their expenses have gone up, understandably so. So I mean, there's all kinds of things that maybe residents and even city employees don't think about that are popping up. Gasoline is certainly the most visible, but there's dozens of examples where we're paying more for the same service that we did last year.
Well, and you touched on this too. It's the reason why you have reserves, why you have a rainy day fund, because you just can't accurately 100% predict when prices are going to skyrocket.
The other thing that's important for residents to understand too, we always craft these budgets in May and June of this year, and you're budgeting for all of next year. So our budget that we're doing right now, that's trying to predict expenses in December of 2023. We're trying to predict what's going to happen in 17 or 18 months, and sometimes that's pretty challenging. But like I said, it's one of those things. We try to look at forecasts, but we also try to have that rainy day fund
too. All right, instead of talking about the future and forecasts and whatnot, let's talk about right now, and this is the last question for today. But you can't go anywhere in Lansing right now without seeing a lot of activity around town. You've got annual street maintenance going on, and probably even more so, you've got fiber improvement, internet fiber improvement going on with two companies currently. So it's really been busy out there, and I know we put out on social media just a reminder, like even on side streets that might see 8 cars a day traffic count, you've got to be careful pulling out of your driveway simply because you've got people that are working in the right of way. So I know you've experienced it yourself. What's the word from our city administrator on how active I've never seen it more active in the 20 years I've been here.
Yeah, it's been incredibly busy this summer, and it will probably still be busy for another couple of months at least. Going back to the genesis of some of this, we would always hear from residents about this desire for more high-speed internet options. And, by golly, we had 2 people come knocking at the door almost at the same time. So you're right, we have 2 high-speed fiber internet providers who are doing work in town right now. So they're putting locates in people's yards. They're digging and boring their lines through right-of-way. That's been challenging for some of our residents, understandably so. One of the things, and we spoke about this at a previous council meeting, I think sometimes people maybe don't realize where right-of-way begins and right-of-way ends. I think maybe sometimes people think, well, my property begins at the curb, and that's not really accurate.
Right.
So right-of-way is typically 15 or 16 feet beyond the edge of the curb. And right-of-way, this concept is that's where a lot of utilities go. Or if the city ever needed to expand that street, that's where it would go. So, if you look at like the GIS on the county's website, people are not taxed on that right-of-way. They maintain it, they mow it because you want it to look nice like the rest of your yard, but you're not taxed on that right-of-way portion. And that's where, probably 95% of that work is going on right now. And, the other thing that I would tell citizens who are really frustrated too, so we have a $10,000 bid bond with each of these companies. So think of that almost like a deposit. And, if they don't put the yards back how they found them, we can retain that $10,000. So these companies certainly have an incentive to make that yard look the way it did at the outset of the project. Now, here's where we're running into challenges though. They're doing this work in late July, early August, and maybe late August. That is a terrible time to be planting grass.
Right.
So I don't think the contractors are going to be trying to get that yard started again probably until early September. So maybe once September rolls around, if your yard is still looking poor, let us know, and then we can talk to the contractor.
Right.
But again, they have a financial incentive to make that yard look the way it did at the beginning. Really frustrating right now. It's a lot of commotion and traffic right now. But I want to say next year, when everyone's yards are looking similar to how they were and we have multiple internet options, I think people will be pretty excited about it. The other thing that you had touched on too, lots of mill and overlay work going on right now. And the timing of that, we always try to talk to our contractor to try to have that done before school starts. So hopefully, they can get most of it done in the next few weeks, because I think school's starting on the 16th or 17th of August.
Yeah.
But hopefully they can have that done. But there's certain neighborhoods in town right now where you've got the internet contractors, you've got mill and overlay contractors. It's busy. It's a busy time in Lansing. But at the same time, it's a little bit exciting because people are going to have new roads, new curb, new sidewalks, and hopefully more fiber internet options. So it's challenging, but hang in there, Lansing. Keep us posted if your yard is still looking rough in September, and we can talk to that contractor about it. But hang in there, we'll get through it.
And there are phone numbers and other ways to contact the contractors who are working for these fiber companies. If you do have an issue, just go to lansingks.org. All right, I've been speaking with Lansing City Administrator Tim Vandall. For Lansing Pulse, I'm Ken Miller.